Hey, thank you for joining us. This is Appthropology, the podcast where we chat with the people behind awesome mobile apps. We'll look to understand the biggest lessons they've learned for bringing value to people, and we'll dive into some interesting stories and insights about how they build and who they build for. So I'm your host, Jim Lorraine, head of growth at AMP, and joining us from the barn today is...
Paul, your co-host and data scientist and co-founder of AMP.
Thanks, Paul. I feel bad for people who can't see, who aren't watching the video podcast on YouTube, because you have quite the background, the real life background today.
Dialing in from Indonesia today. So
there you go. That's all right. It works. So this week's guest is Martyna Malinowska, co-founder and chief product officer at GajiGesa. Martyna has an incredible background in finance, working with smaller regional banks all the way up to big banks like UBS and JP Morgan Chase. Martyna has recently transitioned more predominantly to the fintech space, serving as a product director at Lendo and now co-founding GajiGesa, so helping millions of hardworking Indonesians take control of their financial lives with dignity. So the GajiGesa app provides members and employees with earned wages access, financial education, and other financial management tools to improve their long-term financial health, responsibility, and empowers employer partners with enterprise-grade HR analytics to perform and improve employee productivity, engagement, and retention. So I thought it was pretty cool. I don't mean to make that a commercial at the beginning, but it sounds very fun. So Martyna, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me more about GajiGesa. So how did you realize that there was an opportunity here?
Yeah, so maybe to start with, to demystify really what GajiGesa and earned wage access are, let me share with you a bit about just the problem space and how my professional experience actually led me to solving that, going deeper into that problem space and looking for the solutions there.
I love it.
I spent, as you mentioned, most of my career in fintech, working with banking, non-banking financial institutions or startups with objective to solve one of the biggest challenges in Southeast Asia, in any developing regions, which was just banking the unbanked and underbanked. This typically involved back then coming up with solutions to be able to better assess the user identity, risk, bring technology closer to the borrowers, being able to take people through the digital journeys of financial institutions. And actually, throughout that experience, what it meant, I had to spend a lot of time with potential borrowers, users of financial institution products, and I was astounded and surprised for years that the people who actually approached financial institutions to get a loan or financial institutions approached them, in most of the cases, those people actually who needed financing, they experienced very unexpected economic shocks during the month and were not able to manage their cash flows well. And in reality, they didn't really need a loan. And even the most responsible financing out there was not really solving the problem they really had. And when I mentioned these economic shocks, which happened to them throughout the month, I mean anything from a sudden illness or, let's say, an accident of a family member, inability to pay bill payments because the due date was just before the payday, and motorcycle repair or just some travel costs. So this is what brought me to co-founding GajiGesa, which is now the leading financial wellness platform in Southeast Asia. Today, we focus on Indonesia itself with a vision to empower hardworking Indonesian employees to take the full control of their wages and increase their financial resilience without really necessity to go for borrowing, without necessity to take a loan, and what's worse, to take a high interest bearing loan. What GajiGesa means, it's a quick salary, and the innovation behind it lies in ability to access by user wages, which are earned but not yet paid. So not to confuse it with a loan, because it sounds a bit like advance, but these are the wages which employer actually owes to the employee for the work output. And this can be finished hour of work, a day of work, the shift or project. And these wages are made available to the employee through GajiGesa interface. We actually have 3 of them, but I will share more on this a bit later. And with a push of a button, the salary selected on the interface, the amount selected, as long as it's been already earned, is just transferred to the employee selected bank account or electronic wallet if the employee is unbanked. And in order to be able to actually provide employees with that service, we need to work with employer, as you mentioned. So we integrate with the employee workforce management tools, or sometimes we just provide a dashboard if it comes to the employers who are not digitized yet in terms of workforce management. So that they can actually input information about the employee staffing or the employee productivity, which then we take and translate into the salary information. And this services itself of GajiGesa for us as a business are monetized based on transactions. So we look at transactions, and the cost of these is either borne by employer, can be borne by employee, or can be also subsidized as a percentage of the fee by the employer. We also work with multiple workforce management systems directly, who offer our service packaged as a part of their offering together with their core product. And in terms of like really what we want to achieve, the bigger goal, the mission of what we do is the financial resilience, which is in the core of the problem we are looking to solve. We define it as the ability for user to manage cash flows during the time of economic stress. And impact of financial resilience can be translated into reduction in financial stress or increased savings, moving away from informal predatory borrowing when this sort of stress occurs. And before we started GajiGesa, we actually been running multiple surveys, interviews, and of course now we continue doing the same. We started with Indonesia market to really understand the scale of the problem of this low financial resilience. And just running casual surveys, more than 68% of respondents admitted that they are actually forced to reduce their usual household consumption in not only in the event of unexpected expenditure, but also on a usual month just before the payday. And but when forced with the unexpected expenditure, 81% of them were forced to take a loan. And subsequently, as we aggregated the data and we looked at our impact, it turned out that for 90% of respondents who had to sacrifice their consumption or they had to borrow, now with GajiGesa, they have reduced their financial stress and they can use their own money to cover the shortfalls in cash flow during the month. So that's a bit longish story behind GajiGesa, what it is, what we are looking at, and the bigger mission.
That's cool.
It's awesome. Very, very nicely paints a very nice picture. And if I can sort of summarize it, it's sort of you're creating a technology that can improve the process between the employer and the employee. And you gave some good examples of the kind of shocks, or even just in terms of monthly expenditures. But can you characterize or just draw us a bit of a picture of the kind of person who's using this and the employee side, and then maybe as part of that, who their employers are, right? Like what kind of, like we can imagine the shocks or the instances that might disrupt their monthly process, but what kind of jobs are they doing? What kind of employees are these?
Yeah, sure. So when we started during the first year of the operation, we really started working more with a white collar segment, SME segment, tech segment as well, in a tier 1 cities of Indonesia. And this was mostly due to the fact that our sales team was extremely small, or rather non-existent back then. And we need to have a good access to the employers and their ecosystem to be able to introduce the product. And this was the time when I did a lot of pitches myself with my co-founder. The objective of reaching to that segment was mostly to just stress test our product, gain initial feedback, understand a bit better if it's a white collar space we should target, and SMEs to acquire, which is typically easier than acquiring bigger enterprise. But the learning soon was as such that the space is a bit crowded in terms of competition to offer different type of employee benefits. And we started after that a foray into tier 2 and tier 3 cities, focusing more on bigger companies with more than 500 employees. We call them enterprise-grade businesses, with a focus on a lower income, underbanked or unbanked blue-collar segment. Typically, lower income and blue-collar goes hand in hand with, in Indonesia, in terms of characteristic of the employee. Blue-collar is more to describe their tech savviness, financial understanding, lower income in terms of their ability to manage cash flows. But if I was to paint a picture like who this persona is, imagine a weaver in a garment factory in city like Sukabumi. I don't know if you ever heard of that city, or outsourcing staff in Surabaya. These are typically the most vulnerable type of employees, without any career history, savings, insurance, no benefits provided by employer, and most of them struggle with this vicious circle of informal and predatory borrowing. They're also typically less financial savvy, as I mentioned. If it comes to technology, though, they use mobile apps, and this is very interesting. So a lot of employees in Indonesia, when they get employed by the bigger factory, the factory typically would also work with a bank, let's say a BNI. And BNI would necessitate to create payroll accounts for all of these employees. It typically happens after 3 months of being employed, sometimes a bit longer. So when I was interviewing these individuals, most of them, pretty much everyone, had the BNI banking up on the phone. So it was quite amazing, like how employer engagement was able to bring them closer to the banks. But soon after, I've also realized that the banking app was there because employer asked them to install it, but also BNI relationship was there just to receive salary and take it out from the ATM on the payday. So these relationships exist with the bank, but they are extremely weak. And we typically categorize the individuals we target as underbanked more than unbanked because they would get the bank account to receive a salary. On some occasions, you see 10% of users are completely unbanked. And also in terms of demographics, 30 years old, typically 20 plus, 30 plus years old, and increasing participation of female users. And it's quite amazing because these are also our top and power users. When we analyze their behavior, we see that they very often use these earned wages to be able to pay for their household expenses, also the unexpected ones. And what is even more surprising and interesting to see is that they use these earned wages to cover for their working capital for their side businesses. So throughout that experience, as we went through from white-collar SME segment to blue-collar enterprise segment, product works for both. It's actually quite employee type agnostic, I would say. But we just realized that the better educated employees typically have a better access to different kind of benefits provided by employers. The space is a bit crowded, so we decided now to focus more on the blue-collar tier 2, tier 3 cities.
Makes sense.
Very nice. I like the Surabaya description. Really fills it out, I think, especially for folks who aren't as familiar with some of the financial terms.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with earned wages. So is that common practice in Indonesia that you've worked to earn some money, but you haven't been paid yet? Is it like less? I'm used to you're paid once a week or twice a week or once a month or whatever, and it's pretty predictable. Right. Is it different in Indonesia?
Yes. So in Indonesia, everyone is paid once per month, irrespective of the salary brackets. It's actually quite unusual for Southeast Asia, because in Southeast Asia, in most of the markets, everyone is paid twice per month. So it is standing out compared to other developing markets in the region.
Interesting.
And so if it's once per month, that's the baseline. What's the how would GajiGesa work in terms of changing that frequency or kind of stopgapping an emergency?
Yeah, so we are open 24/7 real time for the employees to access wages. The interesting thing is that we have to follow some policies though. So the employers may have own policies regarding how much of the earned wages they are willing for the employee to access, just because of their concerns around attrition, if they access too much on a specific day, or they just access after the payday. So for us, when we work with employer, we gain access to all the employees, and then we open the app for everyone, and they can just access it anytime they want with a push of a button. It basically takes 2 clicks to be able to request an earned wage of desired amount, and it's immediately transferred to the destination account of your choice.
Cool.
And in terms of the settlement, so what happens is that, so there are different flows. Sometimes employers provide their own capital, which is housed in a special account which we manage. Sometimes we provide the capital from third-party institutions we work with, and employers settle it with us on the payday. So whatever employee access throughout the month, then we get back on the payday directly from the employer. So it continues to be a B2B2C engagement.
I was going to ask about that. So I noticed when I was doing some research on the employee part of your site, you have a place where the employee can recommend it to an employer. So you have both, right? The employer can pick it up as a benefit for their employees, or the employee can bring it up to their business. Which way do you typically see? Are you typically brought in on the business side, or is it typically like employees spread the word and then an employee brings it up to their company?
Yeah, spot on. The employee to employer referral work pretty well for the SME segment, because this is when employee has a better access to the employer, to the decision maker. Let's say you have a 10 people company, and your employee comes and says, hey, I want this benefit. Typically, it's easier to say yes, or more difficult to say no. If you work in an enterprise and you are with your colleagues, 10 of you want the benefit, first of all, going to the decision maker, finding and getting access to the decision maker is limited. And then decision maker just agreeing to make some changes or introduce some benefits because 10 of the workers ask for it is less common. So I would say depends on the segment. So employee to employer works better for SME segment. Enterprise, it always has to start with employer.
That's good. I like that you opened up both channels because it seems really smart, because you could grow either way, but it is interesting to see how it splits by segment. I was curious. So the other thing is, looking at the app, it looks like you have quite a few features. So it's not just like you can pop in and get whatever pay you need, but like you mentioned, you're trying to educate and make people a little bit more financially resilient. So how do you encourage users to explore like more features in the app and not have the relationship you mentioned they have like with their banking app, where it's just purely transactional and very shallow?
Yeah. So actually, let me share with you maybe what is this vision we have. So we want to become an everyday responsible, personalized, with emphasis on responsible, financial app, and to really be in this forefront of the future of employee pay, which is characterized by the greater personalization, digitization, flexibility, focus on well-being and transparency. So a lot of these are lacking in a typical banking app. Let me kind of unpack it. So let's talk about personalization. So EWA itself is a concept which is nothing else than provided by employer, personalized flexible pay package that really takes into account employee needs, preferences, and productivity. So this is in terms of the personalization which EWA as a product brings. But then on the top of this, thanks to our ability to control for the salary fund flow, we want to really to do hard work on behalf of a user where we redistribute this income they make, which flows through us as long as it happens before the payday. We want to redistribute between different type of expenses which are necessarily like bill payments, help them to save and put the money into savings account or invest, let's say invest in gold, or remind them that they have to remit money to their family members and facilitate that. So I feel like this education is much more powerful when the actual action is facilitated as compared to focusing just on the content or just facilitate the one transaction in a month. So EWA users typically come to the app, if not every day, every second day. And they do typically 4 to 5 transactions. So it's much more than they do with a bank they receive the salary through. So that's in terms of the personalization level from the which EWA brings as a product and which we are trying to facilitate on the app. And then there is this level of flexibility. So the ability to request the earned wage really any time and any amount as long as it's earned with a push of a button. And transparency. So transparency of pay is ability for the user to check on the app if they're already eligible for the pay itself. And this helps them with month-end reconciliation with the employer for the attendance and the work output. It actually happens very often that the accounting between so the notes of the employee on how much they thought they worked and they should be compensated for, and the employer calculation differ. And this is typically settled on a month end. With our app, this could be monitored on regular basis. So this is what sets us away from the regular banking app. And when we look at this user engagement to make sure that we can reach that vision of becoming everyday app, we measure actually both the number of transactions users do on the app, but also the sessions to really understand how we are doing in terms of becoming the part of the employee everyday life. So we see the number of sessions is typically 4 times higher than transactions, which shows that our app also supports transparency efficiently as opposed to being just used as a transaction app, as you mentioned. And then, the vision of supporting financial resilience, building financial resilience, is also continuously pursued. So we run impact surveys on a regular basis, and we also speak with our users to uncover the insights to make sure that our product help them to actually get on the right path of healthy financial management. We don't leave them on their own. We actually facilitate that monthly journey of the cash flow management.
That's a really neat point. I think it also helps us draw a little bit even more of a picture of the user. So that sense of like ability to track what's and kind of increase the alignment of what's actually getting reported. So basically, you have workers who maybe are working shifts or being paid hourly or something like that, where they're able to realize by just opening the app and seeing how much they've earned, which is a representation of how much they've worked, since it'll be relatively fixed. And so without waiting to the end of the month, they can actually see, oh, yes, I've gotten credit for all of the hours I did. If I did an extra 2 hours and the boss agreed that, those were extra 2 hours, and now I can see that those are reported versus, oh, they slipped through because the boss was busy and had a bunch of other things on their plate and didn't get a chance to record it. So then you have to wait to the end of the month, and then there's a conflict, and then they have to go back and, check and resolve it. And so you actually end up waiting another 2 weeks before you get those key 2 extra hours of pay. So that's a beautiful little insight there that effectively, just by enabling earned wage access, you need to be able to account. And that accounting is actually something that these folks and your users don't actually have absent GajiGesa. And that's a whole nother value add. beyond just the pay itself.
Yep.
Yeah. I love that too, because it's
Very
you
nice.
remember it in the moment. You know, I worked 2 hours. I worked an extra 2 hours that day, but then give it, 2 weeks, and you can even forget that you did the extra time. So it's hard to remember that you've done it. So having it closer, I like the fact. I think this is probably the first time I've heard somebody say we're so happy to have so many more sessions than transactions. Because usually we talk to e-commerce apps who are like, we need you to buy something every single time you're here. But I think it's a brilliant metric because it's showing that you're adding value beyond just the transactional element, which is so cool. So that's a great metric for you guys. And that you found that and that you're focused on that, I think really does kind of tell a story. Do you have like educational resources as well on the app to help people to learn more how to control their finances and be responsible with their money?
Yeah, we have, but we have it. So we have it more in a format of interactive content. We actually introduced Instagram type stories on the app. So we provide them with a content through that, like a very short videos which they can watch. So that's how we are trying to help them feed them with that content. But I think I see that the users really understand the value and the behavior changes as we start providing more and more products on the app. So we started with just earned wage access, cash out, right? Sending your salary to the bank account or wallet. Then we moved and added bill payment options. So ensuring that we remind users they have to pay their bills on time and the transaction happens through us. Then we added medical products, so helping users to purchase medicines or get a telehealth consultation, actually WhatsApp-based consultation with a doctor. Then now we are introducing investment product, which is just going live soon. We introduced remittance, local remittance. So I think that just triggering user to do certain actions and then providing a reason and helping them to realize the benefit of doing it is much stronger than just the content. And if content has to be short, crisp, and easy to absorb, so typically videos.
I think I saw some of those on your YouTube. I think on your YouTube there were a couple that were more like story looking that had some things. I have to go watch them. I couldn't understand all of it.
Yeah.
I need to catch up on my financial literacy and also,
likely, so.
Yeah. I was going to say, I need to catch up on my financial literacy and my mastery of the Indonesian languages, which is pretty not great at the moment. No, but that's cool. I like that content concept too, because everything doesn't have to be a very long blog post, especially when somebody is already in your environment, like the app, right? You are speaking the language of the people who need to understand you, not literally just Indonesian, but also the way that they prefer to receive information. So I thought that's very cool.
Yeah,
so when you
right.
when you launch a new feature, so you're going to launch investments or you're going to launch, the telehealth, how do you approach adding the new feature to your app? Is it kind of like we make that, we add it to the app and then we make a video to announce it, or is it everybody gets a notification that's here? Do we hope people just see it on their home screen, or is it something through the company? How have you found to introduce those new things most effectively?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We typically start with teasers. We introduce features before they are fully available on the app. We take like this one, let's call it sprint, 2-week sprint, where we socialize the features. So we have like a simple button with a bit of fun content. We have the video. We explain to the user what the feature is for. We start getting them interested. If needed, sometimes there are specific actions they also have to take to avail for it. If, let's say, there's additional KYC needed specifically for investments or savings, and we don't have that data, we collect it. So we build a suspension first, excitement, and then we launch features. So when we launch, we typically do it, so we channel the message through in different ways. We definitely work with the employer. So we announce it to the employer and we provide them with digital content to share with the employees if they're willing to. Or if it's a bigger employer who has dedicated account manager, the account manager will go with a leaflet or with a banner. And in terms of the app, So yes, there is a push notification. There is a teaser on a homepage as soon as you open it, saying there is a new feature which takes you through the app tour and explains to you how to use it and provides more content if you wish to read about it. So that's how we typically channel the message if it's on the mobile app. But we also have two other interfaces. We have Progressive Web App and we have a WhatsApp, which kind of, especially WhatsApp is limited in terms of how much we can engage with the users. But yeah, this is typically how we are going about new feature release. Also, we have a module which is a gamification module. So we always add there this one mission, which is try the new feature. At least minimum we can convince user to try. Let's say if it's a saving, then we ask them just a minimum to deposit on a saving account. So for them to finish a mission and get some reward. So that's what we do on the top of typical communication.
Cool. I like that. I think it's a great feature to start with a teaser like that, because I don't think many people do. You might have a shot across the bow. You might have a quick announcement, but not many people go to the level that you've done to kind of build up the excitement ahead of time before the feature is even available. But I think it's smart even for putting in, like you said, some of these features, you need to do some work ahead of time. So if you just launch the feature right away without helping them through any of those early steps, then they can't even use it when they get it, or it might not be a convenient time. So I think that's good.
There's quite a nice range too, as well. If you think about it as sort of saying, one of the things you said earlier on was, as well as gaining access to the wage, you can kind of help how that wage gets distributed across the needs, the typical and predictable needs of folks. Investment is a really important way to use your wage to kind of grow wealth and kind of build some more stability, so that you're not as susceptible to disruptions. But then there's also sort of medical practices and health needs that are important to kind of get ahead of the curve, and connecting it to applications there to help them distribute there is really interesting. So it's almost like there's a wealth of opportunity of value that you could potentially create for your users. And I'm guessing you have some, you've mentioned it several times, the kind of user research you do, surveys, things like that. I'm curious, is there anything that surprised you in the 2+ years you've been working on GajiGesa, in terms of, you had this vision of these are the kind of applications we should build on top of the wage access. But anything where you were like, realized that, wow, this is something we hadn't even realized, but our customers or our users really end up needing? Or has it been just, really about, and anything surprising there that, or less expected that you thought than what you would have thought originally?
Yeah, so I think it's potentially around investments. I always was under impression that the individuals we are targeting today have a limited understanding of investments. And it turns out that majority of them have gold investment, which created a great opportunity for us to offer that product as well in a digital form. So I think people understand specific aspects of finance. Like if I was to ask the same individual if they invest, and they would tell me they invest in gold, and I would ask the same individual, do you borrow, and do you think that the borrowing you do today is a predatory borrowing, or it's borrowing which put you at disadvantage? Many would say no. And I think it's just this community sometimes which have been built around lending, which is exploiting them, but they don't realize it. So if I asked the user, hey, by the way, so when you borrowed last time, did you have to pay an interest? They would say no. And then I would start asking, okay, so you borrowed, how much you had to pay? And now we start talking. So many of them don't realize that the community around them sometimes is exploiting them. They just find it normal. So which brings me back to the concept of financial education. They are not financially savvy enough, but then they understand the concept of investments. Many of them also savings. So it's very interesting because it's a bit contradictory. But quite interesting learnings around that. And I think other than that, something what I have learned around the interface which we have built, it's an interesting story because when we started building GajiGesa, we built it on the progressive web app. And the reason we did it was because we wanted to launch very fast. It was the initial pilot phase. We wanted to quickly iterate on the product features, probably in a more chaotic manner, unstructured manner as compared to now, because we work in sprints. So when we released that progressive web app, everything was fine. But users kept on asking us about the mobile app continuously. And I feel this is not because the progressive web app was more inferior as a solution, but because they were really used to this frequent engagement more with Android, iOS apps, Play Store than really with a web app. So there was this friction which we observed when onboarding the users, when they struggled really to open the browser and to type the website address, and not to mention add their PWA to the home screen. And a lot of complaints and drop-offs just on this first interaction. Now the progressive web app we use is mostly for the integration with third-party apps we embed our interface with. And we moved naturally to mobile app, which eliminated the question around, why you don't have a mobile app as a tech company, just build one. And it was much easier searchable through Play Store, which users were much more familiar with. But then, so that was interesting. And then but unfortunately, as we started moving to tier 2, tier 3 cities, we ran into issues of internet bandwidth and the app download. So it turned out to be quite a big problem, actually. So we launched the WhatsApp-based earned wage access service. The challenge that we observed with WhatsApp was that retention and the number of transactions was much lower if I was to compare similar users. And we realized that our ability, of course, to offer multiple ways to use EWA balance on the app was much larger, and it actually made a huge difference for users in our way to interact and influence them. So what we started doing is very often in these low internet zones, and we start converting WhatsApp users to app users. So we introduced the strategies as such that we offer WhatsApp first, the interface which they are very familiar with, to be able to make them realize of the benefits of EWA and get comfortable with us as a brand and our offering, and then we migrate them slowly to the app to build deeper relationship with them. We actually see quite huge conversions from WhatsApp to EWA. I always thought that the WhatsApp would be a better solution for that segment because it's an interface they already know and they're comfortable with. But then our ability to really engage with them was limited. But good to see that the conversion matrices are very good though. So we are able to actually capture significant segment of users and continue our relationship with them the way we find effective.
Yeah. That's a nice insight about really exploring and learning about the appropriate surface. Because I think that's the thing, is we know that in most of the world, for most of us, in fact, but also especially in places like Indonesia, the phone is the personal compute. It is the place where technology is brought into a person's life. But as you pointed out, there are many ways the product and the application can be surfaced. It can be surfaced through the browser, through a native web app, through one of the app stores, through an app itself, and also through messaging channels. And it's true that people are working can potentially work in all three, but particular applications work better in different channels, and that's what you've learned. That's really interesting that the browser just adds that extra layer of friction, and maybe even if it's just the friction of expectation on the user's side, but that's incredibly important. You have to learn that and then adapt to that. But as well, I think, I've heard a lot of folks really bet hard on the messaging channels and sort of saying people are living in WhatsApp and Telegram, etc., and that this is where they want to be. But it turns out that, yeah, maybe for more deeper applications in their life, or something as important as accessing their wage in a broader way, to really get them to see that value. Again, the channel, the messaging channel itself is maybe not the end, is really not the end state. So that's really, really interesting to think about.
How do you get people? So you mentioned transitioning people from WhatsApp into the actual app, and you mentioned bandwidth was the issue of downloading the app. So how do you get people to convert from WhatsApp into the mobile app?
Yeah, so it's also situational, because the internet may not be strong at the point when they are being presented with GajiGesa. So then at their leisure, whenever they get the better access, they are able to download the application. Yeah.
So in other words, it's not that. Sorry, I was just going to say, it's not that they have low access across the board. It's just that their access is spiky. So in some places, the Wi-Fi is really bad, or the data signal is pretty poor. But in other parts, maybe when they're at home versus when they're at work, or when they're at their local hotspot. And so they might be presented GajiGesa in a place where it is low. And so the initial adoption rate is lower. But then over time, you can kind of surface the value at a time when it's more feasible or convenient to download. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's correct.
Yeah, I was talking to an app that's in Latin America, and they're like transportation, and they mentioned the same thing. They said everything's really spotty in Latin America, so they have to do the same thing. It's WhatsApp and it's SMS for them, because they can't rely on somebody to have a data connection all the time, but they want someone on the app. So I was curious, if there is it just I send a message, every 2 weeks you get a message to the WhatsApp people that says, hey, remember to download us when you're on Wi-Fi? Or is it like something more elegant? Is it just a regular reminder to, like, when you have Wi-Fi, hop over to the app, there's more fun stuff here?
So, yeah, I mean, we just look at the pattern of usage. And if we see that the user stayed with us after using the app for the first 1 month, then we start slowly grooming them to move. We just provide them with a different content, and then we help them to understand that the app has more features they could use. And so we typically encourage them to use app because of the abundance of different features they have an access to. There is a regular messaging which happens. It's very tough to explain to the user they have good and bad internet, so we have to test it out, typically in the evening when they are at home, or during the lunch time when they are in a cafes. These times typically work.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it's always the question of how do you, what if somebody likes the WhatsApp interface for whatever reason? They don't want an app, so you don't want to bother them with, every 2 weeks they're pushing me to get to that, but yet, speak to those people who would benefit, but just like you said, at the point when they were presented the app, they couldn't download it at that moment. No, so that's pretty good. So go
ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, do you have, like, as far as encouraging people to explore more of the app, you mentioned a little bit of segmenting, as far as you look for people who, for example, have stuck with you for a month or more. Is that the most effective way that you've found to split people up, is by how long they've been with your app? Or do you also look at, like, these people are paycheck but not yet investment, or investment but not yet telehealth? Or what's the best way you've found effectively to divide up your users so you can kind of deliver each group the most value?
Right. So we look at so this is where we get very personal with the user. We look at their salaries and disposable income and the usage of that income on our app. And then we try to understand how the usage is redistributed. So we strive towards ensuring that the users start accessing more and more wage to us. So let's say a typical user would access 30 to 40% of the wage through our app. To become an everyday app, we really want to reach this level of 60%. So this is how we are looking at it. Users who use 5% of their disposable wage, 10%, etc. And then we also further segment them by what do they use it for. So I think the goal number one is like we want the higher percentage of those disposable income to go through us. But to do that, we help them to understand how they can actually spend it. So overall, the salaries is a very sensitive space because we are also dealing with vulnerable employees. So how do we advise them to spend it wisely? We want to increase it from 30% to 60%. Now, how do we do it? So this is how we typically look at the users, disposable income, and then further redistribution of that income.
So just because I don't know, if somebody's only, putting 20% through you guys, where's the other 80% going? Is that just stuff they're getting from their bank if it ends up being deposited in the bank? Okay. So you're looking... 80%
is what they get, the remaining salary. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So part of your goal is being useful for like the things you mentioned of your bills and things like you're regularly paying anyway. So part of the benefit is instead of, waiting till month end and then having it in your account, you can structure it through you guys to, pay your bills when they're due and things like that. Do you have like auto scheduling and stuff so they can just pay their bills whenever it pops up through the app and not have to worry about going in and approving each one and all that?
So today we still want them to approve, but we are actually moving to the automated bill payments because users actually want it. We just didn't want to get into the space that, hey, the app transferred money on my behalf and this is my salary, what's going on. We are extremely careful on this. And engagement matters for us. So if it's just even pressing OK button, just gives us more comfort. But we are moving that direction. We already have power users who trust us. So building trust first, and now we are getting into that automatic income redistribution which we want to facilitate.
Yep. That's awesome. Have
you done any kind of a UX experience where it is like abbreviated thing? Like instead of maybe the typical access is 3 steps, button this, press this, confirm. And where you kind of sort of say, if they've got the, like Gojek in Indonesia has an abbreviated, if you take a ride frequently enough, I can just hit one button to schedule that exact ride. It knows that I want to go from this point to that point, and I just hit it and I'm done. And that's kind of like a UX intermediate step. It's still not auto scheduling, but it's cutting down on some of the steps in the process. Is there anything like that you guys do or thought about, or reasons why not to do something like that?
Yeah, so we have it for bill payments. We know that the user always get 12,000, not 50,000 of the bill purchase. So we have a quick button for them on a homepage, purchase now. It cuts few steps, yeah.
Okay.
Helps, definitely. I mean, any type of personalization is useful there. Trying to still maximize it, but yeah, these shortcuts are pretty good.
My dad gave me his copy of the 4-Hour Workweek, and in that book, I don't know if either of you have read it. Paul, you strike me as somebody who's probably read it in 5 minutes, but it does set up automatic bill pay because if you don't have to think about it, it's just one less thing to worry about, and it's less time and all that. And I have an option on my banking to click one button and it's make reoccurring payment or whatever. And I am still the type of person that goes through every single month and looks and checks the decimal places because I don't trust that. So I would be one of your users who probably would say, what the heck? But, as long as you give people that option, I think, to make recurring, and then I feel like you have that set up. So is there any particular steps that you're doing as far as, you mentioned increasing trust? That's so important for you. And I forgot, we've talked to some other fintechs before and kind of looked at their approach. Are there any specific actions that you guys do intentionally to build trust?
I think, I'm getting back to personalization. But when I say personalization, is even just, hi, Paul, welcome to GajiGesa, right? And You open the app and like, hey, oh, this app knows something about me. Then you check, oh, this app knows my salary and this app knows where I'm employed. The salary part can be a bit scary, but hello, Paul, and we GajiGesa work with Ampler, right? So like it's it starts building the initial trust with the user. This helps. We were trying to actually measure how much it helps as well. We managed to increase the login to transaction by around 15%, like huge, because our conversions were already pretty good. But there was an uptick once we introduced that level of personalization on the app. It's very simple. It's just hello by name, support this company. We are now introducing also a bit of a color schemes of a branding of that employer as well, just to provide even greater comfort. Yeah.
I like it. I think if Paul logged in and you said, hi, Steven, then Paul's trust would go down quite a lot. So I think that makes a lot of sense. No, that's a good one. That's a good one. It's funny because you think of, personalization now can be so much more than just your first name, but it is comforting to have somebody address you, by your first name. So I like it. That's very good. So you've mentioned you've expanded so much. So as far as having telehealth and having, bills and being able to remember to pay family and all that stuff. So where do you see you guys going next, if you're able to share some of that?
Yeah, so I think after we help users to be able to manage their borrowing behavior, right? So the first part is when you look at the financial pyramid, the first level of a problem is borrowing. So how do we help them to, once they have a wealth they created, how do we help them to grow it? That's the next step we want to go towards. So investment, savings, and any behavior which can help to grow the wealth.
Smart, very smart. Cool. Paul, do you have any thoughts? Any closing questions?
No, I think this is really nice. I really like the focus on understanding the underlying user, what their problem is, and then kind of discovering along the way different ways to make to solve for that. And there is clearly a lot of space here to go in many directions. So that whole question of prioritization and following the lead of where it's going to add the most value becomes really critical. So there's a lot of good insight here. Thank you for spending this time with us, Martyna.
Mm-hmm.
No, thanks. Thanks for your questions. Very interesting questions as well. So happy to answer them and glad I was able to share that insight.
Yeah.
I think you guys have done an amazing job learning your users. You've shared some insights, cross-cultural that I appreciate, especially like how culturally it's accepted to take a predatory loan and people don't see it as a predatory loan but yet they're still saving, like they're investing, but yet taking these loans. Like the things that you've been able to uncover are so important to be able to offer those people value and to teach them and to educate them. So I think I think we've been awesome to be able to speak to many fintechs who are doing good in the world. And I would put you guys in that bucket. It sounds like you're doing something very awesome to help those people to not, those employees to not have to rely on predatory loans, obviously. So yeah. So great job to you guys. And thank you again so much.
Nice to hear that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is a wrap for us this week. So thank you again for tuning in to Appthropology. We hope you learned something that'll help inspire your own work. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and leave us a 5-star review. And that is a wrap. Please make sure to connect with Martyna on LinkedIn too if you haven't. All right. Thank you, everybody.